not saying we shouldn't have sales processes. They're absolutely critical, but I think there is a risk at getting too tied into, maybe married to only one framework being the only way to sell, that we miss opportunities.
Leslie, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've seen you a couple of times. I was watching a RevOps panel, and that's how I come to discover you. And I found out that you were actually a Chicagoan, so we kind of share that in common. But I'm excited to share this time together, just to kind of learn your transition into this sales training and coaching business. But you started your career in selling. You were actually an individual contributor, became sales leader, worked at multiple enterprise sales organizations, and have a lot of reputable brands as customers in the process, right? And selling into those organizations. So can you share with our audience a little bit about that journey, how you got started, and now you're offering sales training and coaching for enterprises?
Yeah, 15-year journey from an IC fresh out of college, just smashing the phones, like 150 calls a day, every single day, to 15 years later. Now, I'm a full-time founder running a 6-figure agency, working a 4-day work week. So quite an evolution. But one of the interesting things about being a founder is that a question I get asked really often is, don't you wish you would have done this earlier? And I don't, for a lot of reasons. But one of them was, I simply don't think that I had the breadth matched with the depth of experience to allow me to be as good at what I do now. Like I wouldn't have had that if I would have started earlier. Like I really value the fact that I have sold to like pretty much every ICP out there. I've sold price points from, 4 figures to 6 figures. I have sold sales cycles from 1 call close through to, like an average 9-month longer sales cycle. And having the perspective of what it's like to sell to those different personas at different price points in different environments is what makes me so good at the job I do now, which wasn't exactly an answer to your question, but I started as a inside sales rep, so full cycle AE, really, really transactional sales cycle. I moved into management very quickly because I had worked all through, I'd worked since high school and then worked my way all through college to pay for college myself. So I actually had quite a bit of management experience, which that's not the norm. I broke the record for getting promoted from, AE to, it's not AE like we think of it now, like account executive. It's in the full cycle role, it was maybe a little bit less prestigious than what you might think of as an AE because it was more transactional. But the role you came in at was that sort of entry level role. And then you got promoted to senior AE. And I broke the record for that promotion because it was strictly based on deals closed. And I got to 20 deals faster than anybody else had done. So I really teed myself up for moving into a management role the next time one was open. And that happened when I was only 6 months into role. Suddenly I was managing a team of 6 reps, most of whom were like very, very seasoned sales professionals. And that really informed the rest of my career. I spent a lot of time in player coach roles, which I know is not very popular. Like people really think that those are inferior roles. But I really take a lot of pride in the fact that for most of my career, I was actually doing the job that I was coaching and training other people to do. Like I was in the trenches, remembering how hard it was and really staying present with what worked and what didn't work. A little bit later in my career, I did move into just some more like straight leadership, strategic roles, being employee number 1 at a startup. Although if you're employee number 1, just like if you're a founder, you're kind of still a full cycle AE. I was first in country with another organization. So even though that was a very strategic role, you're still leading from the front by showing everybody else it can be done by getting on the phone and just doing the dang job. So I've spent a lot of time thinking very strategically about how to talk with our customers instead of at them. But I've also spent a lot of time just doing the dang thing.
There's a lot to unpack there, right? Obviously, one of the things that you mentioned that I do think I appreciate a lot is the fact that you didn't jump into coaching and training right away, just maybe a year or two. I've seen people who've been like a BDR for 2 years, and then they're all of a sudden has a training program offering training on how to be the best BDR, right? But in your case, like you said, you had a breadth of experience across multiple industries, selling different product, price points with a different sales cycle, right? Selling to different ICP, like all of that brings different level of complexity. And then now, 15 years later, you are actually able to go train people across multiple different different challenges that people have, right? I think that is something to be admired because you didn't just become an expert overnight and now all of a sudden, going around teaching people. But obviously, the fact that you were able to see success and get promoted very, very fast, there's got to be some testament to your ability. How much of that would you contribute to your pure grit and just doing the work that was necessary versus your skill, right? Like I think you talk about the will versus skill in most people's career, right? How would you attribute that?
Ooh, maybe 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's for anybody that's made any volume of cold calls. Think about making 150 and then doing it again every single day. But then also imagine that it is the beginning of the Great Recession and you're responsible for calling CFOs. And then think about how much grit and resilience it takes to show up every single day. It was a really, really, really hard job. So I don't want to dismiss the fact that there were some nights where I went home and cried because it was really, it was really, really, it was really hard, particularly to sell to the CFO persona at a time where not just their professional lives, but for many of them, their like personal lives, their financial stability was crumbling around them.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I was still successful were the soft skills that I brought into the role. I didn't even know those were sales skills
Mm-hmm.
at the time, but things like, and now we talk about them so much, but 15 years ago, my gosh, I would have been terrified to put something like empathy or
Mm-hmm.
curiosity on my like CV as a
Mm-hmm.
skill.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have put it on there because I would have been immediately removed from the hiring process because those were not commonly thought of as sales skills. But those types of soft skills, and then certainly I was a huge nerd and I use that in a very positive light, but I was in, speech and debate all through high school and college, did Model United Nations, Model Arab League. So what I didn't understand is that I'd spent, the better half of a decade practicing rhetoric,
Mm-hmm.
practicing listening, and practicing asking smart, targeted questions. And doesn't take a genius to figure out that that translates really well to sales. So I'd say 50-50. The skill sets were why I did a really good job. The grit was how I survived it.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a lot of different companies you've actually worked at, right? Are there any companies that actually had formalized sales training, or is more so like, hey, here's a little bit of information about our product, now go figure out how to go sell this?
No, the first company I worked at, I don't frankly have a ton of nice things to say about them because it was
Mm-hmm.
a very toxic culture, but the product was incredible and the training was insane. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize how unique the dedication to training was until I left that organization and
Mm-hmm.
started interviewing with other companies and talking to my peers more. But it was 3 full days of like classroom style training before you were even allowed to like go get on the sales floor. And it wasn't product training, it was objection handling and time management and the difference between urgency and sales pressure. Like it was really
Mm-hmm.
foundational sales skill set training. And they were extremely dedicated to continuous training and continuous improvement. That was a deep part of the culture and the value of the organizations. So that was then my expectation for every other organization. But generally I was first in seat, either first in seat in country, building a new country, or like at the startup, literally the first employee. So
Mm-hmm.
I had the privilege of getting to create that culture on my own team and in my own organization. And, it's probably part of the reason I'm so passionate about it now that I've made it my career to consult and advise and train and coach folks.
Mm-hmm. And so what was that not the experience at the other companies either? Almost all the other ones did not have like a formalized training.
Well,
Um,
I had to create it. That was
okay,
part of my
for
job.
most of the companies that you were part of. And then did they actually use any sort of a framework like Sandler or anything like that, like a spin sales or anything like that, or is this kind of homegrown training that they've used to train people?
Yeah, homegrown
Hmm.
training. Pulled like a lot of concepts were pulled into it, which is something I also have carried forward into my own sales philosophy and my own sales methodology, that we as the sales community can get hung up on being BANT or medic or spin or snap or
Hmm.
challenger, and it is often at the detriment of our ability to create meaningful connections with our customers,
Hmm.
because we are so seller centric, and this is, I'm medic and I need to make sure that you're medic qualified, I'm going to spend time with you. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have qualifying criteria, we absolutely should. I'm not saying we shouldn't have sales processes, they're absolutely critical, but I think there is a risk getting too tied to and too maybe married to only one framework being the only
Hmm.
way to sell, that we miss opportunities to sell in a way that maybe better suits our prospects. So I created a sales methodology that's really complementary
Hmm.
and really easy. It's called Earn the Right, and
Hmm.
the core of it is just prompting to ask, have I earned the right to ask this person to read the email that I'm about to send them? Have I earned the right to ask this person to spend 30 minutes on the phone with me to learn more? And if you have not said something that is relevant enough to them, that is valuable enough to them to answer yes to that question, it's a litmus test to go back to the drawing board until you have that like insight, relevance, value to share that earns the right to make that bigger ask of them.
Hmm. I would love to expand on that a little bit, but I do remember you mentioning like the talking with the customer versus talking at them. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we just mostly talk at people in sales and marketing
Hmm.
too. It's not just sales. Maybe it's more marketing's fault.
Hmm.
But we have very one-sided dialogues, and anybody can open up their email or their LinkedIn inbox right now, and they're going to see this. The emails are going to be feature heavy when we've not validated whether or not they even care about those features. They are going to be full of I language instead of you
Hmm.
language. I'm your sales executive at blah blah company. We do our product, and we need to flip that on its head and make it about the person that is
Hmm.
getting the message. And I'm not saying that every single message needs to be hyper personalized. That's not me. I go for a strategy of value based segmentation, meaning I don't think you need to create a custom message for every single person, but you need to be very, very sure that the message that you are sending somebody is relevant and valuable to them. But you can kind of do that at a bit of scale. It's a bit of a bridge of the quantity versus quality. But then
Hmm.
what it really boils down to after that is asking questions and being curious. And the old school sales approach was talking at and bulldozing at I language. And the way that sales has evolved is that if you are not giving your prospect a reason to engage in conversation with you so that you can sell with them, it's going to be almost impossible for you to thrive
Hmm.
in in a modern sales environment.
Understood. So I know you talked a little bit about empathy, and some of those things are critical skills that you need to have in order to be able to really sell with them, as opposed to just talk at them and just making them want to buy, right? Like some sort of manipulative game. So is that kind of the framework that you explained, right? Earn the right. Is that kind of that framework all the way through the sales process, especially when you're doing cold prospecting, getting into the door? You haven't really earned the right yet, right? And you're actually hoping that you can earn the right to have that initial conversation to see if there's a need to be filled. So how do you in that early stage earn that right when they haven't even expected anything from you in the first place?
Yeah. So for cold outbound, how you're looking to earn the right is saying something that matters to them. So let's talk about that value based segmentation concept. What that might look like in cold outbound is taking your entire territory and then building some layers into it, some sub segmentation. So let's say you're selling to CFOs. Let's say I wasn't so, badly damaged by my first experience selling to CFOs. I wanted another shot at it. They're actually one of my favorite ICPs to sell to. But let's say, generally your territory is companies over $1 billion and you're going after finance and it's, 5 different industries. To create a value-based segmentation approach, you're going to want to just get a bit pickier. So if it's 1 billion plus, trim that down a bit. So maybe we just say organizations that are between like 6 and 10 billion, because they're going to have a specific set of challenges that $1 billion orgs aren't, and that like $100 billion orgs aren't. So narrow down the revenue. And then we're not just saying anybody in finance. Pick a specific title, because the things that are important to a CFO are different than the things that are important to even their direct report, who's that, VP, SVP, EVP of finance. So now it's 6 to 10 billion CFO. We're not going to all of the, all of the, why can't I think of the word?
The champions.
No, industries. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Why can't I think of the word? We're not going to all of the industries. We're going to pick one industry. So, let's say it's only CPGs. So now it's 6 to 10, only CFOs, only CPGs, and then we're still going to go deeper. And maybe we are only selling to CFOs who have been in seat for less than a year. Or maybe we're only selling to organizations that also released a sustainability report. Or maybe we only are reaching out to folks who have a CEO who made a public commitment to diversity. Like, we're figuring out how to build in those additional layers that leave us with a group of folks to reach out to that's pretty small. Maybe it's only 37 prospects or 12 prospects or whatever it is. But you're going to be able to write copy for them that is the same exact email that you are extraordinarily sure is going to be relevant to all 37 people that are in that deep, deep segmentation. And that's how you are earning the right to make the ask of them to read the email, because you're not writing an email that's, "Hi, I hope you're well. I'm Leslie, your sales rep at X company. We do, and our value prop is." You are leading with something that is highly, highly likely to be pertinent to a new CEO in seat that is trying to deliver against a CEO commitment to increase diversity in the organization, in the CPG industry, in this type of, revenue band, in the 6 to 10 revenue band. Really, the easiest way to think about it is when you read the email before you send it, just be like, would they care? Have I given them anything to care about? And hint, they don't care about you and they don't care about your company because you've done absolutely nothing to make them care. It's not their responsibility to give you their time or their attention. It's our responsibility as sellers to earn it, to give them a reason.
Yeah. So obviously that example that you gave, right, is I'm assuming that that's going to be a very high value product, right? It's an extremely high ticket offer, right? That you're willing to do that much of the research. No, you don't think so?
What do you think high ticket is? Like what?
I wouldn't want to be spending that much energy if I'm selling something $10,000, right? But if I know that if an average contract value, because that's so much energy required to go sell a $10,000 to just spend that much research to do, find 37 prospects, in my perspective.
What are you going to do instead?
I guess I have a much higher TAM, like a total addressable market. I might have a larger volume of companies and I'm trying to talk to that persona, but I should be able to have a message that can probably be well suited for like 250 to 500 companies. And I know for a fact that message might be relevant to them. Right. But I'm
going to push back. There's absolutely 100% no way that the same message is relevant to 250 different accounts or companies. And you even said it yourself, like it might be maybe relevant to them. It's not. It might not be completely irrelevant to them, because I know you're good at your job and I know you're not sending the, like, I hope you and your family, right? Like but there's no way to make it relevant to that many people.
Hmm.
And taking a value-based segmentation approach bridges the gap, because I also don't think
Mm-hmm.
that we should be hyper personalizing every single message. And that's like, to your point, right? If you sell
Yeah.
something that's 10K and you're hyper personalizing every single message, there's no way that I've seen in 15 years and working with hundreds of reps and products that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be able to scale that type of outreach to get enough in your funnel. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's finding the balance between quantity and quality. And you hear a lot of folks, particularly on LinkedIn, saying like, oh, like metrics don't matter. And like, I'd rather send out 5 great emails a day than 50. And I think that that's bullshit. But
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there is a balance. And, earlier before we went live, we were talking about early stage founders. And it is actually one of the biggest mistakes that I see early stage founders make, because they are usually chasing VC funding, and all of those conversations are TAM, 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 which is total addressable market. And it is very difficult when you then come internal to adjust your thinking from we need to approach our entire TAM, even to we need to approach everybody that's qualified, everybody that could buy to us, to where you need to be, which is we need to strategically and intentionally connect with our most ideal buyers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that I always ask my clients is, how many deals do you need to close in a year? And like the answer is usually somewhere between like 20 and 50, right? Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
every, depending on what the ACV is, like it's not every single deal. So I'm like, okay, your TAM might be 20,000 accounts, but you do not need to penetrate 20,000 accounts to close 50 deals. Quite the opposite. If you try to penetrate your entire TAM because you feel like you need all of them to hear from you, you're just going to burn so many bridges. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
absolutely decimate your domain reputation. It's going to compromise deliverability forever unless you get new domains. And you're just going to piss a bunch of your prospects off, which
Mm-hmm.
is going to stagnate your ability to grow later on, maybe once you're out of that like 0 to 1 or 0 to 2. So I would push back and I would say it's not that much work
Hmm.
to create something that's highly relevant to 37 people, because it's you creating it once and it still can go to 37. So it's not 1 to 1, it's 1 to many, just not 1 to all. And it becomes pretty drag and drop. So like you create the sequence and you've created it for the CFOs that fit that exact persona for CPG, and then make a copy of the template and then change the topics out for CFOs of financial institutions, and then do it
Mm-hmm.
again for CFOs of pharma. So you are creating repeatability, but you are creating repeatability in a way that allows you to not waste time later in the process talking to the people that don't matter, talking
Mm-hmm.
to the people that maybe could buy, but they're going to be a hassle. They're going to buy at the wrong price point. They're going to be that 6-month sales cycle when they should only be one. They're going to be the customer that comes on board, but because it's not a perfect fit, they ask for the moon and the stars. So I would respectfully push back.
So I think my fear is right, like especially knowing cold outreach, you've probably seen it too, right? The open rate has been declining with all kinds of
Yeah.
automation that's just increasing the volume across the entire spectrum of all these buyers, and then also just the reply rate also declined because of the fact that people are just immune and they're all getting inundated with cold outreach. So my logic is that unless you have the volume, you're just not going to be able to hit the number of prospects you need to get the replies that you need to hit the target, right? So that's the perspective that I look at, and I can see your approach as well, right? I think maybe I haven't done it real well to see the reply rate and success of it. So that's probably my fault. But oftentimes I think I'm erring on the side of volume over a lot more personalized and targeted email outreaches or prospecting outreaches.
Yeah. And it's not just you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's still the standard
Mm-hmm.
approach. So I think that you are in the majority
Mm-hmm.
on taking that approach. And it's part of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? The majority of people are taking that approach in a situation where 37 people should get an email, 250 people are getting an email.
Mm-hmm.
So now, 213 extra people are getting an email. It's making their inboxes feel overwhelmed. The messages that they're getting are either irrelevant or just sort of like adjacent to something that they actually care about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's creating a sense of overwhelm with our prospects, which is then creating a backlash of them being quicker to block and spam and delete without a reply, which is
Mm-hmm.
then coming back to us reflected in lower open rates and lower reply rates. But I
Mm-hmm.
would caveat all of this, because I know we've specifically been talking about email. If folks listening are taking an email only approach, you are not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're never going to win if you are only taking an email approach. I highly, highly recommend a 3-channel approach. I recommend phone, email, and social. If your
Mm-hmm.
prospects aren't on LinkedIn, find them where they're at. If you know that one of those 3 channels works way better than the other 2, figure out how to be even more strategic on that channel. Like, if it's phone,
Mm-hmm.
then figure out how to be more strategic in the way you leave voicemails. Maybe you think about adding in a text message touch point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you get more intentional about when you do the phone calls. Like, I don't think I know what's happening, because I've seen
Mm-hmm.
it and I've seen the data, is that we all saw a huge drop off in the efficacy of what we were doing. I mean, I think we've seen it like slowly decreasing, but really like 3 years ago, we saw it
Mm-hmm.
plummet.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw it plummet because there was a 40% uptick in outbounding, because we were all in our homes and sales were down and field reps couldn't be in the field. And then our response was to just do more of what already wasn't working very well.
Yeah. Really ruined it for all of us. I think you need to preach this message to all the salespeople out there.
I'm
And
trying.
so obviously you brought up the concept of the founder-led growth and then the founder-led organization, right? In the early days, you don't have an option. You don't have a sales team. You kind of have to be the breadwinner. And a
Yeah.
lot of times in smaller organizations, especially if it's not a SaaS industry, they're selling some sort of a service or product
Yeah.
that they might still have the ownership still involved in some sort of a proactive prospecting and sales role. So what advice would you have for those people, especially have to have that responsibility, but still also have to wear a couple other hats that might be operations or what other thing, right? What sort of things have you seen work really well for those people to still be successful and effective in that sales role and not just have it as a second thought?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is absolutely make sure that you have the mindset that you do not need to speak to your entire TAM.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you only need 10 clients, like, just always keep in mind that that means you maybe only need to have like 100 conversations. So like, to like chill and dial it back. You don't need to talk to anybody. You just need to talk to a handful of the right people. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
that mindset is super, super important. Even with that being said, if we think about all of the things that are on a founder's plate, having 100 sales conversations, like, let's make it 120,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then we can say it's 10 a month. Like, having 10 sales conversations a month on top of every other conversation they're having and everything else they're doing is still a lot, particularly when you think about the fact that to get those 10 sales conversations, they
Mm-hmm.
had to do a lot of other activity, make the calls, send the emails, do the LinkedIn, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really, really, really recommend to founders is systematize it from the jump. What I often see is, because they're the only one doing it, or because they're kind of doing it on a smaller scale, there's an assumption that they don't need a sequencing tool. I like could not disagree more. Take some stuff off your plate, like this value-based segmentation, pulling that forward. A lot of that can be completely automated, because you
Mm-hmm.
did the work beforehand to make sure that you got the messaging right. And since you don't have to hyper personalize it, you can just field map some little things, and like a lot of those steps can be automated. We're seeing some tool. I mean, I'm still not super bullish on a lot of the LinkedIn automation tools, because a lot of them are very, very, very bad. But there are a couple of them that can help when we're running these smaller scale campaigns. Like, again, we're not trying to use the LinkedIn automation tools that are like, I can help you send connect messages to 1,000 people a week, right? Like, in this
Mm-hmm.
context, you're maybe sending it to 25. So like, take the mindset that you don't need to reach everybody, you just need to reach a few people so that the workflows become more manageable, and then use the tools at your disposal to support you and automate where you can, to not only take things off your plate, but also to make sure that you are staying on time with your steps in a sequence, because founders are maybe more likely than the average rep to get distracted and just stop reaching out
Mm-hmm.
to somebody, just kind of forget about them. And the sequencer will help you stay on time with your steps. It will help you really optimize for the stacking effect that then will help get higher conversion rates. Going multi-channel will help you increase the efficacy of the entire sequence. So mindset, sequencing tool, and 3 channels.
Yeah, and I would advise anybody, if you're not using a technology, you're not going to be able to stay in a cadence. I think the technology allows you to do that, and that's super important. I think the one thing that I would add is the time blocking, because I think that's my biggest weakness, because you always put the breadwinning as the last thing, because it becomes, even though it's the most important, sometimes the urgent takes over and you forget, and oh shoot, 2 days just went by, I haven't done any prospecting, right? And then you suffer 3 months later, because that's when you need the opportunity to be closed and you don't have, your pipeline is getting thin, right? So that's the challenge.
Yeah, you're speaking to my soul. I just did an entire keynote on Monday in New York on
Ah,
identifying parts of your workflows and your sales process that are falsely urgent,
mm-hmm,
and figuring out how to use better time management skills, including time blocking, to
mm-hmm.
prioritize the tasks most closely related to your key result area. So yes,
Yeah.
same page there. I love that. Good call
Yeah,
out.
because I think that's like the simplest thing you can do is to not, don't give your calendar control to just anybody else, right? You have to control
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
for
Good
sure.
one.
Obviously, we can sit here and talk forever, but I have one question. So obviously, especially when you talk about selling software, product is a slightly different than selling any sort of a service or, consulting or anything like that.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give, especially when prospects use these sales conversations as a consulting opportunity to get insights out of you? What advice would you give people to not to fall
Mm,
into that trap?
yeah, for like service-based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can tell you what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So the link that I leave open to be like, book, because you want to create an opportunity for inbound, is a link for 15 minutes. And when people come in through that link, if they are somebody that just at a surface level, without asking them any other follow-up questions, seem like a really good fit, I will immediately email them, thank them for booking, and then I will offer them a bigger time
Mm-hmm.
block. And if I look and they are definitely not in my ICP, I just tell them that they are not in my ICP and I
So
delete the
decline.
meetings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I obviously like do it politely. Like, thank you so much for your interest in working with me. I work with organizations that are between 15 and 50 million with at least 10 headcount in their sales department. I've looked at your company on LinkedIn and online, and it doesn't seem like you fit that criteria. Please let me know if I've missed something. Otherwise, I can make recommendations for other folks who
Mm-hmm.
serve, like serve where your organization is at right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
I do it in a way that is like polite, professional, and offers to still be helpful. But like, I can't meet with those folks. I do not have the time. Going back to like talking about focusing on tasks that support my key result area. My key
Mm-hmm.
result area is to run a $250,000 business running a 4-day work week. I don't have extra time to meet with people that I don't want to sell to. Not that
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't buy from me, I don't want to sell to them. So I think that's a technique that works really well. And I would say the other thing that I do is I send out 4 questions before meetings. And like one of the questions that I think gets the most insightful responses is, I'm sure your team has a lot of, or like, I'm sure, depending on who it is, I'm sure you have a lot of priorities in the coming months. If you were going to pick the number one most important thing that you needed to deliver in the next 3 to 6 months, what would it be? Or if you were going to tell me, like if you were going to share the number one accomplishment that you needed to see out of your sales team in the next 3 to 6 months, what would it be? And if they write back with multiple things, I will respond again and be like, okay, but of these things, blah, 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 which is the number one most important thing? And I will remove additional meetings from my calendar based on the responses to
Mm-hmm.
that, because often stuff will come up. Well, they'll be like, well, the most important thing that I need to accomplish is actually hiring 3 more people. Cool. Get at me
Mm-hmm.
when you've hired those 3 people, because if that's your number one thing, I'm not who you should be investing time and money with right now. So be comfortable saying no to people who aren't in your ICP. And you can do it by offering them recommendations and creating a referral system with your network. Everybody benefits, and start the qualifying process before the first meeting to determine if, like, to both prepare to make the meeting meaningful, so that you can drive at your goal, which your goal is obviously setting up a next step that drives to revenue, but also be comfortable saying like, I'm not the right person to serve you right now based on your goals.
Yeah, it actually goes a long way too, because they realize that you disqualified them and you said no. That actually increases their desire to want to work with you in the future when they are a better fit. That's for sure as well.
Yeah, you're so right.
So one last question. What advice would you give the younger Leslie knowing what you know today?
Good work. You go, girl. I don't know, Sam. I get asked this question a lot, and I feel like I never have a really good answer, because everything that happened to me, everything that was done to me, everything that I accomplished got me to where I am now. And where I am now is in just this like extraordinary, I'm in the best job I've ever had. So I think I would just give my younger self encouragement that this is a tough job. And that's particularly true for women. B2B sales is a tough gig. And I know it's not the only profession that is extremely male dominated and very toxic in a lot of ways. And I would say every woman I know, 90% of the women I know, have experienced some level of sexism, sexual harassment, sexual assault, gender discrimination in this profession of B2B sales. So I think I would just tell my younger self to not give up.
Awesome. Well, that's a great word to end our conversation, Leslie. I certainly enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with my audience.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Most certainly.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by OneIMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.